Hi, I'm Stephanie Stint, and welcome to my thoughts on barriers to Web 2.0. First of all, a summary of the articles. An overarching theme of all of the articles that we read was that the students we know must possess skills that are much different today than they were many years ago so that they can become productive and a crucial part of the 21st century workforce. And in order to do that, teachers need to be very aware of how to use digital tools and technology within their classrooms and what skills to teach students. The barriers to allowing that to happen were addressed by many of these articles, and one of them was the lack of access. I was really surprised that there were so many people who did not have access to basic internet, high-speed internet. But it does seem like sometimes schools don't have good service, and that makes it difficult for their students to utilize the technology that they do have. Another barrier, obviously, is expense. A school will have the expense of purchasing the technology in the beginning, and with budget cuts, even that's very difficult, not to mention the upkeep and how technology is continually changing, and the need to always keep up with that change requires funding. There are, just students as parents at home who can't afford the monthly internet bill. And in addition, there's the cost of personnel to help support teachers in that, the cost of upkeep and repairs, and schools often don't have that funding built into their budgets. Infrastructure itself was a barrier. In rural areas, again, I didn't realize there were some families who still, because of their location, were not able to have access to internet and many of the technological tools. But there doesn't really seem to be a plan from the federal government or no focus plan from the federal government for an internet expansion at this time. And of course, since technology is always changing, it's hard to keep up with changing the infrastructure as well to support that. Most of the schools I work with do have the infrastructure that does support school-wide Wi-Fi, and so kids are able to access that throughout the building. Also, no vision was cited as one of the reasons that there were barriers to the technology access. Most schools are willing, I have seen, to implement those innovative practices, but again, it's all new, and they really don't have short-term goals nor long-term plans in place to budget for the technology and to provide for the professional development of their teachers. And the open resources was another part of one of the articles we read. Those are materials with open licenses. They can be shared and purchased online. They're free. And that's relevant to me because many of our schools are looking into these resources. Curriculum, as you know, is very expensive, and these are usually free or low cost and easily accessible by teachers and in schools. Can the digital divide be resolved? Well, I think it depends. I really don't know right now. It depends on if governments see this as important to ensure internet access for all, and then what they are willing to do to provide the funding for. The government can actually drive plans for building infrastructure for internet access and improvements. I know that we've had telephone lines that access telephones for all, so I would think that there would be a way to do that. And there's ways through community organizations and grants and nonprofits to provide funding for some low-income households to access the internet. However, access alone is not going to solve the digital divide. People are going to need education on the appropriate use of that technology, the digital literacy, etc., how to interact with one another. What skill sets do 21st century students need? I look broadly at this, and I think teachers just need to be aware of these skills and then how we use technology to ensure students are able to develop these skills. First of all, when students enter the workforce, we obviously want them to be prepared cognitively, which means they understand and can make reasonable judgments and decisions and have a basic understanding of those things. Obviously, we want academic preparation, meaning both foundational and higher level thinking skills in reading, math, and the other content areas. And again, technology being used for how can we continue to develop these skills. Basically, strong background knowledge in a variety of topics. Internet and technology access can definitely help students build a broader background because they're able to access places and people and information that they wouldn't normally be able to, particularly if they live in rural areas. And interpersonal skills are how students relate to one another, how we relate to one another. Teamwork is one of those, empathy, communication, both nonverbal and verbal communication. All these should be taught, particularly in the use of technology, because that helps alleviate some of the cyberbullying, some of the inappropriate posting, some of those things that we see. Also, we can definitely use technology to build teamwork and communication skills as well. Intrapersonal skills, also important, meaning that emotional intelligence. What are our ethics? Again, that goes along with how do we relate to one another, both face-to-face and online. It's the good work habits students have, the attention that they have, self-awareness, those kinds of things. So even though our world is been changed through technology, these are still skills students need to learn. And of course, knowing how to learn, that growth mindset, to always be curious, and then how do we answer our questions and how do we find out our answers to our questions? Where do we go? So this curiosity and the ability to teach yourself and learn those new concepts. And how do I learn those new concepts? Because technology changes so fast, students will have to have those skills. The global economy's impact on my own personal internet use. It impacts everything. We do everything online anymore, particularly because we're in a rural area. It's kind of been a lifeline. We do all of our banking, make all of our payments online, pretty much purchase most everything online. I don't do this yet, but I've seen that you can purchase groceries online and have them delivered to your home. That probably wouldn't work for us, but it's everywhere, and it pretty much drives everything we do. If we didn't have internet, I'm pretty sure that we couldn't function. And communication, obviously, we are instantly able to communicate with anybody we want to via text, phone calls, internet, emails, all of those things that are available to us at the touch of a finger. And being my coworkers are spread throughout the state, it's easy just to ask a quick question via text and get an immediate response. I communicate with those who live in other states. I'm able to communicate quickly with my schools that I work with throughout the state. They upload documents to Google Docs and those kinds of things. And I'm able to see their progress on different school improvement tasks. Needed technology training. Again, I'm not very educated on the newest technology, so I think I would just like to know more about what technology is used for many of the instructional practices that students are going to have to be exposed to, such as project-based, problem-based, and inquiry-based learning, and also like to know the difference between those two. I would like to know how technology is currently used for other communication methods and avenues. Are there some that are more expeditious than others? I know we have just been introduced to a robot type of device where you can place an iPad, and that iPad follows the trainer or the speaker around, and that can be projected to schools throughout the state, distance learning. Also, how technology is used for computational thinking and how teachers are using that to help students learn to construct their knowledge. I know there's a lot of applications out there. I know there's a lot of technology out there. I'm not sure which ones are the best and which ones are being used, and how students are using those to demonstrate what they do know or use those to solve problems. And if there are digital citizenship programs out there, I'd like to know more about those as well. And just how schools are able to do that strategic planning for technology purposes and professional development for teachers. While that's not technology per se, Those, I think, definitely those skills are things that I would need to help my school as a future administrator further their knowledge. And also how technology coaches could be used with their knowledge to help educators and help support them in the implementation of these applications and these types of technologies in their classrooms with their students. Is your school or district equipped with 21st century technology? Well, we don't have things like, meaning my schools that I work with, don't have things like virtual reality or artificial intelligence yet, but most of them that I work with do have the basic digital tools, which you see up here. They're using internet. Many of them have one-to-one iPads or Chromebooks. Computers are throughout the buildings and easily accessible to all students. And they are used a lot for communication, and for us personally, we use many different types of technologies for communication, so we have access to that. We also have programs on our computers for creating webinars that we can share with staff throughout the state. There are a lot of advantages to innovative practices, and I'm learning more, as I view others' videos as well. But one that we often don't think about is technology allows some students, particularly those with disabilities, to actually be able to access the curriculum, meaning there's text-to-speech programs and there's hearing aid devices and many of those things that allow students to access curriculum which in the past they would not have been able to do. This immediate access to information I do think is an advantage because information, like I said, is at our fingertips. We simply Google something and we can immediately find the answer to anything we want, and that's not been the way it's been in the past. Almost daily I Google how to do something on my own computer, so I can figure out answers to problems that I'm having and fix those myself. And again, that kind of leads into the next one. Then if we can teach students how to use technology in that way, they can teach themselves. They can learn how to learn. They can be continual learners. And as I said earlier, in this age of continually changing, updated, new technology, that's really important. And that this obviously helps students develop skills that will prepare them for this global society. Those skills to the right, critical thinking skills, collaboration, communication, creativity, all of those are things that they will have to learn to be prepared to be in this new workforce. And allows them access to places and people, as I said earlier, that they wouldn't normally be exposed to, being from rural areas particularly, and vice versa. Those from urban areas can have access to those in the rural areas. It makes our world much smaller in a sense because we're so able to connect with one another. I've seen innovative practices be used as differentiation, which is wonderful. Students who come into your classrooms at a variety of skill levels and some who have gaps in their learning. This can provide multiple ways that students can not only access the curriculum, but demonstrate what they have learned and demonstrate what they know in creative ways. And of course, those collaboration and communication skills. But there are some disadvantages, and I think teachers need to be aware of those. One of the things I'm a little nervous about is with the pendulum swinging toward the use of technology in classrooms, that teachers will focus on that, and there will be less emphasis on things like basic reading and math skills, which would be required to read the materials, to conduct the problem solving, to be able to have those basic skills so that you can conduct those higher level production types of tasks. I'm not sure of the evidence behind things like open resources. When I see schools use them a lot, I personally need to know a little bit more about what evidence behind open resources there are, meaning have they been shown to be successful with students, whether it's a reading program or math lessons. I just need to know more about those, but I think teachers should be asking those questions. What is the evidence behind those? One thing I am a little concerned about is since students are behind screens a lot of the time, computers, cell phones all of the time, iPads, that they become more distant from actual face-to-face communication and contact and have a difficult time forming relationships with people one-on-one. Obviously, cyberbullying and inappropriate postings, those can be a problem if you have not taught the skills as far as empathy and appropriate use. Security breaches throughout the school when things are wired for technology, that's always a risk, and to make sure that you have the proper filters and the software, hardware on your system with which to combat that. And then important to vet websites for accurate information. This is one of the disadvantages, and something we do have to teach our students, is that there's tons of inaccurate information out there. And you can't just Google anything and, you know, write it down or use it. You have to be a thoughtful consumer and think about where you are getting your information, and how can we determine if that is accurate and true information. Inappropriate internet use. I don't remember any specific incidents of inappropriate technology use in my class when I was teaching. However, I know that cyberbullying is prevalent on social media, and students are always trying to get away with something. I think if we're vigilant about monitoring students' computer use, or you know, when they're in our classrooms and they're where we can support them, making sure that we monitor them and that we set expectations for them and say, this is how you use it and this is how we expect it to be used appropriately and responsibly. And then some schools that I've worked with obviously have internet use policies and agreements that students have to sign, saying that they understand what those expectations are and they understand how to use technology responsibly. And then most schools have filters of some kind that don't even allow access to inappropriate content and or social media sites at all. So that obviously helps reduce the chances of that. So while there are some barriers still to accessing the technology and the internet for some students, there are a lot of benefits as well. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.